I've actually been trying to pay attention recently when the AI overview comes up to like check into what it's actually saying. And like, it's wrong all the time.
It used to be sort of paramount for tech companies to get things right, to get things accurate, to provide products that maybe don't lie to their users. But with the AI age, we've seen a sort of a complete breakdown in this mentality. And I think nowhere is it better sort of evinced than with this sort of degradation of Google products. Welcome to Blood in the Machine, a show about tech, labor, and power, made for you, everybody, that Silicon Valley is happening to. My name is Brian Merchant. I am the author of the newsletter Blood in the Machine, as well as the book of the same name, and I've been covering tech and the resistance to tech for many years now. Today on the show, following some new Google antitrust news, we have my good friend, author, podcaster, journalist, Paris Marx, joining us to talk about the final boss of enshittification, Google, and its move to go into full AI mode. Paris has been writing about how to get off US tech for some time now, and he'll have some tips for de-Googling your life. But first, our weekly rundown of news that I've been following in big tech and the growing opposition to it. So a Swedish court has ordered Google to pay $1.5 billion worth of damages in an antitrust case to the Swedish tech company Klarna. Courts found that Google had systematically favored its own services over Klarna's price runner competitor and ordered the search giant to pay what is in Sweden the largest ever sum in damages. This has a few ramifications. One, it reflects the growing sort of antitrust fervor, both in the EU and at home in the United States, where talk of regulating big tech continues to gain momentum in a number of quarters. This also comes on the heels of another major recent ruling in Europe, this time in Germany, where a regional court found that Google is liable for the information provided by its AI overview feature, a ruling that could have significant ramifications given that the feature has been found to provide false information about 10% of the time. The data center opposition has moved north of the border. Protesters showed up by the hundreds in Vancouver, Canada, to oppose the federal government's plans to build 2 new AI data centers and expand an existing one. They were not happy.
The change is happening so quickly without any explanation why. So that's why I'm here. I think we all have to be concerned and worried and be here.
As we discussed last week, opposition to data centers is one of the fastest growing and most bipartisan political movements in the United States. And now we have strong evidence that that movement is growing internationally as well. The opposition also comes in the wake of Canada's freshly announced AI strategy, with plans for widespread adoption and a raft of new data centers across the country. It's the Summer of Ludd in New York City, and I, for one, could not be more enthused. The kids are all right, and they're staging a bunch of performances, talks, meetings, plays, you name it. It's mostly centered around Tompkins Square Park. It's been going on all last week. It'll continue on through next week, and in fact, we will have an organizer from Summer of Ludd on the show to discuss why it's been happening and what's next for the movement, if all goes according to plan, so stay tuned for that. The schedule of events is only accessible via a hotline that you can call, or via zine that you have to pick up in person. There's no social media. I will drop the link to where you can find both of those things. I have the schedule printed in Blood in the Machine in a previous edition. I'll also link to that. But it's great. It's been getting press coverage in Washington Post and in Wired, and it's generally causing the best kind of commotion. And it turns out that theirs is the dominant position. This anti-big tech posture is becoming increasingly popular among Gen Z. Just this week, a new survey found that, as Mashable put it, quote, "It's sexy to be a luddite." A dating app called Hilly conducted a 3,500 person survey that found that, quote, 64% of Gen Z and 56% of millennial daters wouldn't date someone who relies on AI for everyday decisions. And this is funny. 60% of Gen Z and 54% of millennial daters would find someone extremely attractive if they admitted that they never use AI for personal decisions. And conversely, 75% of Gen Z and 68% of millennial daters would be immediately turned off if a date used AI to decide whether or not to follow up on another date with them. Again, it's just common sense. Finally, the MAGA right is leaning hard into a new line of attack against anti-data center protesters and the political movement that is growing to fight back against big tech. That line specifically is that these protests are all the product of a China-based conspiracy bent on undermining American tech companies and American prosperity. It's a line that Fox News has been sort of rabidly trying out, publishing a series of articles mapping out links between left-leaning funders and groups that are involved in organizing the AI data center movement. It's all come to a head with this new development in which Sam Lyman, who's a former speechwriter for U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, has joined, and you can't make this stuff up, the Bitcoin Policy Institute, which released a report titled, and I quote, "Foreign Influence in the Campaign Against American AI." The report alleges that the Shanghai-based businessman Neville Roy Singham has funded a network of protesters that are responsible or chiefly responsible for shutting down the data center expansion in key places across the United States.
Neville Singham's network, in particular, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, has been boots on the ground in dozens of protests across the country that target data centers. His network has been so effective that it's been linked to impacts that have essentially blocked or delayed altogether about $24 billion in AI data center build out here in the United States.
It's really, really funny the way that they frame all of this stuff as though this businessman in China who's, sure, probably spending some money to advance his political interests. That's what millionaires and billionaires do, but to give this one businessman so much credit for the immense grassroots, super powerful campaign that has kind of engulfed our political scene this year, and as we've seen is moving beyond our borders is truly comical. I've reported on these opposition movements. I've reported on town hall meetings and city council meetings where AI data centers have been banned. There's no nefarious plot. These are working class residents. The data has shown that it's a primarily working class U.S. residents. It's farmers and students and union members and you name it. It's real. It's genuinely, when you think of salt of the earth, you could think of data center protesters. These are the folks that are turning out. So it seems to me that this line of attack that the right is concocting and trying to solidify is bound to fail. if only because there are so many people on the right in the conservative movement who are showing up at these protests and can tell in the blink of an eye that this is a crock. This idea that it's a Chinese Marxist conspiracy theory being perpetrated from abroad to bankrupt Silicon Valley is just comical on its face. All it takes is showing up to one data center protest for you to know that. Now it's safe to call this a developing trend in which federal and local law enforcement have been seeking to categorize anti-data center protesters as, quote, domestic violent extremists, a tag that has potential legal ramifications. And so now we see this moving up the chain, up to the Department of Justice, up into the Trump administration, where they're attempting to corral all data center opposition into an extra legal activity, into extremism, into something that could potentially be prosecuted. So we are getting into darker waters here. Again, I think that the saving grace is that the anti-data center movement is a deeply bipartisan movement. Farmers in Oklahoma are just as likely to oppose data centers as an environmentalist in Vermont. So it's really on shaky ground to try to build this line of attack and to codify it. But that's what seems to be happening. All right, but now we return to Google, the behemoth that is swallowing and enshittifying the web, and just weeks ago announced that it is going to center its AI products, whether we want it to or not. And here to discuss Google's turn into mass AI slop is Paris Marx. Okay, today we have Paris Marx. You know him as the host of Tech Won't Save Us, the writer behind the Disconnect newsletter, and general man about town in the world of tech criticism. He's got a new book coming out, next year?
October.
Oh, whoa. October. Well, perfect then. About data centers. It's called Hyperscale. You should mark your calendars, pre-order that bad boy. I have been fortunate enough to get an early copy of this thing. And as you may have heard, data centers are rather important right now in the world of tech and beyond. And reading Paris's book, I feel like, is step one to understanding the entire universe that is unfolding around data centers and hyperscaling and AI in general. So, Paris, thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Mr. Brian Merchant. It's great to meet you for the first time here.
It is. I appreciate your formality too. Most guests are going to get a written document that instructs them as to how to refer to me, and Mr. Brian Archer is preferred nomenclature. So thank you for.
You're very welcome.
For setting the tone here. How are you? What's going on? You're back home. I know you've been traveling around. You've been all over the world as usual. What you're back in Canada?
Yeah, traveling too much as usual, but home for a little bit for a few weeks until I'm back on the road a bit for I don't know, another few weeks, I guess. But yeah, things are well. Doing my final read through of the same book you were talking about. Trying to find the last little things that were maybe missed through all the other reviews or revisions or whatnot. But yeah, things are well. Just busy.
It's a process. It's always a process. Google has been in the news for some rather disconcerting reasons, as usual. And that is, it's finally sort of kicking out the pillars, the last vestiges of its Google search service that has been sort of the dominant way that people around the world find information online for 20 years now or so, really. And they're going to finally let AI consume the entire enterprise. They're handing the keys over to LLMs. they're sort of redoing and the entire approach to search, and this obviously has tremendous implications for any number of arenas, you name it. It means that it's going to be even harder for independent publishers and journalists like you and me to have our work seen and found and indexed, and instead it's just going to be gobbled up by their AI and spat back out at users who may never even get a link to our websites. So news is going to suffer, independent creators are going to suffer, writers, artists, everybody's going to suffer. So that's one downside. The other downside is it just kind of it further accelerates this transition to AI, and sort of cements this new normal. And they're kind of admitting that like the Chat GPT paradigm is the one that's going to be dominant. From they're saying you win instead of finding ways to keep good search around. And then they're going to ultimately consolidate power even more by sort of keeping users on the page. They're going to suck away more ad dollars from publishers and beyond, and they're gonna concentrate their power even more than they already have. And for all of those reasons, when this news went out, I thought of you, because starting last year especially, you've really been putting the pedal down on transitioning away from services like Google for a number of reasons. You're getting away from all of US tech. So to begin, can you tell us a little bit about sort of what inspired your effort to get off of services like Google? I know you're also doing Microsoft and Apple. We're going to focus on Google today because I think for a lot of people that's kind of the big one for a lot of things.
Yep.
But so yeah, so what was your thinking in instigating this sort of transition, and when did you begin it?
Yeah, there's a number of things, right? I think that there has been a sort of general frustration with some of these companies and these platforms and the services that they make for a while, right? And I have been feeling that just the same way that a lot of other people have been feeling it. And so, it's not really a surprise to see, I think, a growing interest in wanting to get away from these companies. And of course, what you're talking about, the most recent Google announcements only add to that, right? And so I actually started to move away from, like I moved away from Gmail and things like that, probably 2 or 3 years ago now, when I moved over to Proton. But then, the thing that really, I guess, accelerated that, or, kind of like furthered the desire to want to move away from these companies, was really seeing the way that so many of these executives got behind the Trump administration and kind of allied themselves with the Trump administration, and then how the Trump administration itself, as well as these tech companies, were kind of collectively using their power to try to stop countries like my own in Canada and countries in Europe and in other parts of the world from effectively regulating these technologies, and trying to rein in the harms that have come of some of these platforms and services that we've become dependent on for quite some time. And so that was really, I guess, even more of the impetus for last year for me to start to say, okay, what would it really look like to try to do this in a more comprehensive fashion, to actually look more broadly at the services and the products that I use, to try to reduce the number of US based services and products, that are kind of like in my suite of things that I depend on. And yeah, it's been a process. Obviously, I'm not like completely free of US tech, but I have started to move away from more and more. And whenever I kind of get the chance, it's been a busy year, but whenever I get a moment, or get some space, I try to assess, okay, what can I move off of now? What's my next thing? What's my next plan or goal or what have you?
So with the sort of the Trump administration becoming kind of like a nexus of sort of activity with Silicon Valley, and all of these bonds being strengthened, and Google very much being one of the interested parties that's been in and out of Mar-a-Lago, in and out of the White House, donating money to the inauguration fund, cozying up to Trump. It's just one more reason on top of that pile of reasons that I mentioned in the beginning, to sort of begin to move away from Google and its services. People will move from Spotify to another audio streaming service or something. Doing that, has been relatively easy in a lot of ways, but Google for a lot of people is like the big one, but for me, this was like the last straw. With Google going all in on Gemini and replacing Google search with Gemini, or at least saying that that's the plan and slowly beginning to roll out these features, for me, that's it. Like, I mean, it's on so many levels. There's the moral and ethical level that I'm done with Google, but it's also just like I'm done with the slop. Like I don't want to wade through slop and try to figure out, what is a reliable search result or what is garbage. And ads are in the mix now, and it's all a big useless stew to me. And I have begun the process now. And so I turned to your guide first. And so if you could sort of, list the all of the different services that are associated with Google that you had to consider. It's because it's not just search. If it was just search, that would be one thing. There's alternatives, and we can talk about that. But Google is a whole array of services, and it's like are baked into our daily web browsing, our email usage, and all of that. So, can you talk about the services that you had to reconsider when you were embarking on this project?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've certainly noticed the Brian Merchant Proton email address in my inbox. So making the effort to make the
Change
move.
is here. The time's
Yeah.
here.
I respect it. I respect it. Yeah, like you're saying, there's a load of different services, and I probably won't get them all because there's so many that are associated with Google, and it's everything from search to email to the browser, as you're saying. And you can even think about the cloud, of course, Drive and say Google Docs and Sheets and those sorts of things. But even like, services that you don't think nearly as much about, like Google Authenticator, right? To get your little two-factor authentication codes. And it always annoys me how anytime you log into like a Google service, it will say like get your code from Google Authenticator, and you need to click that button even if you're using a different authenticator app. Like, I don't know, it just seems like one of those small things that like a regulator should have taken action
Right,
against, but
because
it's so small that
it's
they wouldn't, right?
lock-in. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're locked in.
exactly. And
Yeah,
it suggests to people that that's the only one that they can use with Google services when that's not true, right?
right.
But anyway, yeah. So there's so many different things to look at, to consider, to think about moving away from. And of course, maps, I would argue, is probably one of the more difficult ones, at least in kind of my process of trying to get off these things. But some of the other services that Google offers, I would argue it's actually not as hard as I think many people would think. Certainly, there's like an adjustment period, right? It's going to be a bit difficult to say make the switch with your email because it's going to take some adjustment over a period of months, but it's very much not impossible to do.
Starting with search, I think like search is what's led this charge because I think it is the most enshittified product, to borrow our friend Cory Doctorow's term that has just entered the lexicon so seamlessly now.
And about to get even worse in the coming
Even
months.
worse, it's the prime enshittification. It is like I do feel like Google search turning into AI is like that's the end stage of enshittification, the process that's been going on for the last 10 years. And search there are alternatives, but the AI is also getting rammed into email. So many times I've accidentally like hit the text populate button and then accidentally like populated an AI generated response to an email. I'm like, get that out of here. I don't like it's making my life harder and worse. I will never email somebody with an AI generated message. I will never do that. And if you ever do that to me, don't email me again. Okay, so it's baked into email, it's baked into search, it's increasingly in small and weird ways baked into maps. There's like these weird AI
They're
generated.
doing even more with maps now as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's and I'm sorry, and you're right. Like that is going to be, I think, the tough one. I mean, the obvious. If you're just trying to get off Google, then you can do Apple Maps. But if you're trying to get off U.S. tech, then it is true they dominate so thoroughly, especially Google Maps. But I was sort of working down the list. I'll just go down them quickly, and then we can kind of revisit them one by one. The different services and features that sort of Google owns and that they've sort of locked us into. And this is a big part of how they have become a monopoly, right? Right? It's not just like they built search. They made what was at the time 20-25 years ago the best search engine. Everybody loved it. They won that race, and then they got a bunch of ad dollars, and then they established their monopoly by just buying whatever else was the sort of best in class. They did it with maps, right? Google Maps was not an in-house project. They bought a company that did that. YouTube was a startup that they purchased at the time, one of the biggest startup acquisitions in history, and on and on and on. So starting with search, we got Google search. Next, we have Gmail. I've been using Gmail for, a quarter of a century. Saying that out
Ages.
loud is horrifying. Horrifying. Swear to God, I'm not that old, but but it's been forever.
Did you have Hotmail before Gmail?
When I was in college, our university had like a proprietary, like at
Mm.
UC Santa Barbara in-house email. So that was my first. I don't know that I had. I mean, maybe I must have. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. Maybe it was Yahoo. Maybe I had a
Oh,
Yahoo mail. I
that was
think
probably it. Yeah.
maybe it was a Yahoo mail or something weird, because like back in the early days, like the telecom providers would give you email,
Yeah.
so it was like Sure West or some weird regional telecom that I think our household had email through first, or AOL maybe. Either way, we got search, we got email, we got maps, which really became indispensable after the iPhone sort of showed up, and then we have the drive and the docs and the whole work suite, sort of, that's kind of replaced Office for a lot of people. That's going to be tough. Google Docs. I know you write in your guide that Docs is tough because it's so ubiquitous, and like when you're working on something as a team or with a collaborator, or that you want somebody to check out, like you figure everybody has Google Docs, and it doesn't play nice with conversion. So it's hard to. You have to have Google Docs to be able to do that. It's just universal. And then, as you say, you can keep going down the list through the work suite, all those things. And then to Authenticator, which is another lock-in thing. The password manager, I think, is low-key one of the biggest ones, because it just like locks you into sort of the browser, especially if you're using Chrome, and then it makes Chrome hard to get. So Chrome, the browser, there's another one. So right there, that's all Google. Google owns all of it, and they've integrated it all reasonably well. In order to sort of get off all of them, you you really do have a lot of work to do. Like, they have done a good job of both enshittifying our lives and entrenching us into their systems at the same time. So let's start at the top of the list, because I think search, like, that's going to be top of mind for a lot of people who don't want AI sort of spamming up their search results. So what did you find when you started looking at alternatives to search?
Yeah. So, and obviously, I've mainly been looking at non-US alternatives, right? Like, if you're
Yeah.
okay with US tech, obviously you have Bing. If you're fine using Microsoft, which would be like the major competitor to Google search, you have more
Aren't
independent
they doing a
ones.
bunch of AI stuff too? I mean,
Oh, I'm sure. I have no doubt. Yeah.
literally nobody knows, because nobody's looked at Bing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine they did it even before Google because of Microsoft's partnership with OpenAI, right? Like, I imagine that was kind of one of the first implementations.
100%. They had Copilot. It was like,
Yeah.
it was a tab. This is funny. This is a real time
Real time check.
experiment here. Look at this real time. Oh, that's interesting. I just went to Bing.com, and yeah, Copilot's up there, but it does seem like it's less prominent. So
It's still a search engine at the end of the
it's
day.
still a search engine at the end. That would be really something. But yeah, I just Googled Paris Marx, a Canadian journalist and author.
You just binged, you mean?
I binged you. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Gee, that's when you've got a monopoly, when you've like colonized the language.
Yeah.
Yes, you've got a head start there. Your competition has its work cut out for it.
Yeah. But if you're looking at other ones though, like there's DuckDuckGo, which is more independent, more kind of privacy focused. And in the US, there's more people, I would say, using this one called Kagi, I think it's called, which you need to pay for, which is like, okay, do you want to pay for your search engine? But some people say that the results are kind of better with that one. I haven't used it again because it's US, right? And my focus is getting off of the US options. And so if you're looking beyond the US, then you do have some options like Quant, which is based in France, Ecosia, which kind of positions itself as a more sustainable search engine based in Germany, but has been pushing a lot of AI features that has gotten its like users quite angry. Start Page in the Netherlands, those would kind of be like your bigger ones outside of the United States. Now, the difficulty with the kind of non-Google, non-Bing options is that a lot of them are still reliant on the search index that comes from Google and from Bing, right? And so you're kind of taking results from those two major search engines in most cases. I believe Kagi has some of its own results in there, and Quant and Ecosia are working on a European search index, so some of their results are going to come from that index. But for the most part, those alternatives are kind of taking the results from Google or Bing and kind of, it's not saying that it's from Google or Bing, but those are the indexes that they're using. And so there's still this, even when you're getting off of these major services, there's still this reliance on kind of like the underlying infrastructure. And I guess the hope is that over time, with kind of the incentives of the past few years, that that is going to start to change, and that their search indexes are going to become more robust. But we need to kind of wait and see what's happening there.
Yeah, I mean, they just own the sort of the product category so thoroughly that that even Google's prime competitors are just using their tech basically, and then trying to differentiate themselves in other ways. And I have been using Kagi. That's been my go-to. DuckDuckGo is like the privacy focused.
Yeah. I used that one for a while.
Yeah.
Now I use Quant. Yep.
DuckDuckGo is also US though, right? Or is it?
It is, yep.
Yeah, it is. But
like for a while, I changed my default search engine in my browser, before I started getting off US tech, to DuckDuckGo. And it's kind of like, whether you're using DuckDuckGo, whether you're using Quant, which is what I'm using now, I find that it's like some of the search queries work just fine in those search engines. You need to be okay that maybe the results are not going to be as accurate, though the accuracy of Google results has gone down in recent years as well. But then there are certain kind of queries that maybe are more specific or more image based or something like that, where or even based more on kind of news articles, if you're looking for a specific news article or something like that, where I do find myself often going back to Google because it can just be more difficult to get the result that you're looking for. From those other ones, right?
My position on this whole thing is that I like a search engine is a different product than AI. Search is basically predicated on, indexing and feeding the user accurate and good information, right? Like that was Google's original mission statement, was we're going to organize the world's information and make it accessible. Right. This was the goal, like a giant sort of easy to use library that anybody can just sort of walk up to and easily find good facts, good information about the topics and subjects that they're looking for, whether that's, ancient Greek history or like the best falafel place in the neighborhood. And so when you search for something, you get results that are populated ideally, and Google again first emerged victorious in its field by being the best at this, by pointing people to the best experts and the best sort of providers of that information, where whether it's like most people seem to agree that this is the best falafel restaurant in the neighborhood, and here's a link to the restaurant, and you can go to the restaurant, find its hours, its phone number, its its information. And if you're looking for ancient Greek history, maybe you start with a Wikipedia article, or then it gives you some books written by experts on the subject, and then you actually see those sources. And that's what's so important, is it's pointing you to the actual material, right? Like that was always what was so great about search, is it was basically just this big index, right? Like Google started out with a relatively light touch, and they would do fun things like I'm feeling lucky, and you'd click and it would just send you to a random web page, and you'd go like, oh, this is some stranger in Denmark that I had never even thought to, you can give 2 seconds worth of thoughts towards. But now I know. So it was this way of directly putting people in contact with information. And with an AI product, they're basically shoveling all that under the hood. And so when you ask that Google's AI, what's the best falafel place in the neighborhood? Gemini just tells you. Google just says, like, here's what it is, and maybe there's a teeny tiny little link down, like nestled somewhere in the chatbot's output. But you might not even ever go to that website. You might not actually confirm that it's real. Ancient Greek history, even worse. Like, it's just going to say this is, this is what happened in Athens, and like this is, and then you're just like, oh, okay, and you nod along, and it might be getting, a third of that wrong, or it might be based on one particular scholar's work. It might be distorting the truth, but we don't really know because it has put up a middleman in between the user and the information, and the middleman is this giant profit-seeking entity, which is Google, and they want us to stay on Google products as long as possible. So instead of actually going and, reading the scholar's work, we're reading Google's AI bot's interpretation of that scholar's work alongside of whatever else the AI model throws up. And so in this way, I think this is an overtly hostile maneuver that is sort of driven purely by a desire to keep users on Google products, to keep you to be able to sell more ads directly on Google, even than it already does. It already is, the world's biggest advertising business, or it's up there with Meta. And so I just really think that I don't like maybe people have uses for chatbots. People definitely have uses for search. I don't think that there's any reason that these two things need to be conflated, right? And so forcing that change through, ramrodding it in, I do think is this like act of sort of extreme enshittification and extreme user hostility. And I think it's going to be a disaster for sort of the information ecosystem in general.
And you just have like all of these small mistakes that are built into this system, right? Like I've actually been trying to pay attention recently when the AI overview comes up to like check into what it's actually saying, and like it's wrong all the time. Like I asked it the other day if this is the last season of For All Mankind, the show on Apple, and it was like, yeah, season 6 is the last season and it's airing now. No, season 5 is airing now. Season 6 airs next year sometime, and it will be the last season then. And the Pope's AI encyclical came out the other day, and there's a quote from Gandalf in the encyclical, as many people probably know. And I just like put the text of the quote into Google, and the AI overview came up and said, this is a quote from the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring. And in the like references, the citation in the encyclical is that it's from The Return of the King. And there was like a brief moment where I was like, is the Vatican wrong? Did they get the wrong book? And I was like, no, it's Google that's wrong. It's just wild to me.
All the time, and it's being baked in, and it's wild that we are confronted with this new attitude, this new paradigm among our tech overlords, where like they're okay with that, and there's a lot of reasons that they're okay with that. We don't even need to get into all of them, but it used to be sort of paramount for tech companies to get things right, to get things accurate, to give the best information, to give accurate information, to provide products that like, maybe don't lie to their users. But with the AI age, we've seen a sort of a complete breakdown in this mentality. And I think nowhere is it better sort of evinced than with this sort of degradation of Google products.
Yeah, move fast and break things on steroids here.
They're breaking all over the place, and it is wild that so many people, a lot of people are not okay with it. A lot of people do not have a choice. This is what happens when you have monopolies, where like Google search is just sort of rammed into Safari on every iPhone because they just pay Apple billions of dollars. Like it's just the world's biggest payola scheme. And so it's not like, oh, like people have just love Google so much that they use it everywhere. It's just they've wielded their monopoly power to ensure that they are in a position to do this. And now when they begin to start, breaking down the information ecosystem and begin degrading these products in order to sell more ads. Really, it really is as simple as that. At the end of the day, unfortunately, that they can kind of get away with it, right? The other side of this, and I'll just say it quickly, it's something that I've been kind of looking at, like almost from a personal, like, we run newsletters and podcasts, and we have small businesses, and Google is really meaningfully infringing on our ability to do that by doing exactly what we just described, by taking that content and sticking it. I hate that word content, but I can't get around it sometimes. And how about
Call it your
this?
journalism, Brian.
How about by taking our journalism and turning it into content? How about that? So I'm working on a piece right now where I'm looking at like a specific example. So like as some of you may know, I run a series called AI Killed My Job, where I interview workers in different industries who talk about the ways that AI is impacting their workplaces. And one that I did that was particularly harrowing was with translators. So I got a lot of stories from translators who are talking about the ways that AI has transformed their work. It was, I think, it was a successful sort of volume in that it reflected a lot of different anecdotes and stories, and sort of captured where the industry is at right now. So I thought I would just like Google the new Google, how is AI impacting translators jobs? And I stuck it in, and I got a big fat sort of multi-paragraph answer with material pulled directly from my article. It was the first article that I tried to sort of game to see if this would happen, but it was a very standard search term. I didn't have Brian Merchant, I didn't have Blood in the Machine, I didn't have any of that in there. I just had this phrase, and it just pulls all that text, plops it out there, gives you this teeny tiny little link that you got to get your cursor right over it, and then if you miss, then I'm not going to bother anymore. So it is, I'm sure, sort of costing me click throughs. Google is effectively taking my work and presenting it as its own. And now they can sell ad dollars. They're doing that at scale. Obviously, the number of people Googling how is AI impacting translator jobs is not as big as like what happened in the boys finale or whatever, but it's materially of the same thing. Google's just migrating all those clicks onto its own platform, and it's costing independent publishers, journalists, creators, you name it, a big sort of opportunity to be discovered, and they're taking it shamelessly. It's honestly, you hear a lot. AI is theft. I think this is a great example of exactly how that works in practice.
And there are so many examples of it, right? I was, hearing what you're saying there, it brings to mind, I was in a meeting the other day, and there was a guy pitching on how like small publishers should be okay with this because they can sign up to basically like be part of this program where you get small little kickbacks when Google like takes your article and like puts it in its AI overviews or whatnot. It's like, oh, okay, great. So I'm gonna get some pennies at some point, maybe from the like. It's so like there's this whole industry of people trying to like justify what these companies are doing. And no, it just needs to be opposed.
Again, it's one of those situations where you can imagine a system where this was rolled out or attempted much differently, where consent was any kind of a factor, and there were negotiations, between the different parties. But all that's out the window. That's gone. They just took it. They took everything, and they're continuing to take everything. I always go on about the Luddites, but this is exactly what happened to them. Their material conditions were eroded by people who had access to a lot more to resources and capital and power, and just said, we're changing things now. You may have paved the way for all of this. You may have figured out a system that works for you. You may rely on your craft to earn a living, but that doesn't matter anymore. Here's the new system. We're going to take what you do, and we're going to do it for cheaper and for a little bit worse, and everybody's going to like it because you don't have the power to oppose us. End rant. /rant. So quickly, before we run out of time here, if you wanted to run down some of the other sort of replacements for Google products. So I think search, we got some options. If you're in the US and you're okay with the US, you can try Kagi, you can try Quant if you want the French, the international option. I also tried Ecosia, but it's AI thing. I didn't even it's spammy. DuckDuckGo is getting spammy too. Kagi at least lets you sort of shut it off altogether. Maybe DuckDuckGo does too. But again, guys, make a search engine that's a search engine. AI, do something else if you want. Make a separate product. Give me my search engine that is 100% LLM free. It'll be in the show notes. We'll drop the different options here, and obviously we'll also link to Paris's guide, which has been incredibly popular. It seems like I saw this thing getting passed around. It's called "Getting Off U.S. Tech," a guide, and so we'll certainly link to that as well.
If you just go through some of the basics of the Google stuff, obviously we talked about the search, and with Quant you can turn off the AI as well, pretty easily, which is what I have clearly done. But email, is an obvious one. People are going to want alternatives to that if you're going to get off of Gmail. I feel like the one that a lot of people are going to is Proton, which is what you and me use. But there are like plenty of other options as well, right? Like Fastmail in Australia, or Mailbox in Germany, or Infomaniac which I believe is Swiss or German as well. Proton is Swiss. So there are plenty, right? And even more beyond that, I'm sure there's a bunch of American options as well that I'm not very familiar with. And the thing I always say about email is, for me it was easy because I was using a custom domain already, right? But it's like if you already have a Gmail account that you have been using for a long time, you can pretty easily set up like a redirect to send those emails to your Proton account where you can manage them there and take care of them. And you can also set up an auto reply from your Gmail account letting people know that you have switched to a different email address and they can reach you there now, right? It doesn't mean like shut down your Gmail account right now, get rid of it, and just try to survive with the fact that you don't have this anymore. No, leave it there. You've been using it for a long time. People are used to it being there. Set up your new one and start the process of transitioning. It doesn't need to be an overnight thing, right? And I feel like that is something that makes it a lot easier for people, right?
That's exactly what I've been doing, just almost by default, just because it would be too, I mean, they give you these tools, they want you to migrate over all of the service, which makes sense, but you don't need to do it right away. So as you mentioned earlier, I've started moving on to Proton Mail. As I get, it's encrypted, it's got like a decent layout. It's just will be familiar to anybody who's ever used an email before. But I like the services. I like the encryption, and you can get a bunch of other stuff that looks interesting too. I haven't experimented with their VPN and stuff yet, but so yeah, Proton Mail gets my cosign for a Gmail replacement.
Great.
It is a little more expensive, like once
Yeah.
you bump up to the tiers, like Gmail isn't free, obviously they make you, but they're making up for what they're not charging you in sort of in harvesting your data and messing around with AI tools and stuff like that. So I feel like, and it's not prohibitive. There is a free tier of Proton, you just don't get a lot of storage. So I'm doing like the Mail Essential tier at Proton.
Yeah, and I feel like this is the way it is with a lot of these services that are like alternative, right? Because the Googles and stuff are making their money off of collecting a lot of your data, pushing ads at you. These other services like Kagi, which you're paying for, or Proton, which we both pay for, they're not doing that, right? And so they need to make money in some other way, and this is how they're making their money, is by charging a fee, right? In order to access this service, and so that's how it goes. And with Proton, I use the authenticator, so the two-factor authenticator. I use their password keeper, which again is something that Google offers. Obviously, I use their calendar instead of being on Google or Apple Calendar. I use their Drive, their VPN. I've really kind of put myself into this suite. They even have a Proton Meet that they launched in the past month or a couple months, which is like an alternative to Google Meet, right? And if people want to have like a one-on-one meeting now, I send them that instead of going on Zoom or Google Meet or whatever, right? But if you're thinking about these other Google services, you mentioned the browser, Chrome, which is kind of like the dominant browser these days. Obviously there's Safari and things like that, but Firefox is still out there if you're fine with kind of like a US or open source option. The one I've been using is Vivaldi, which is based in Norway, and it's kind of based on Chromium, right? So it's still like underlying has a lot of the same stuff as Chrome, can use the extensions, all those sorts of things, but is not in the Google ecosystem, is not sending that data back to Google, and those sorts of things. I feel like if we're thinking about some of the more difficult things to replace, we've been talking about some of the easier ones. The biggest difficulties for me have obviously been maps. I have tried many other maps services, but none of them are at the level of Google. As you mentioned earlier, I think the closest one would be Apple Maps if you're still fine using like tech from the big US companies. But where I've been trying alternatives like Here We Go, which is based in the Netherlands, or TomTom Go, which is only for driving, not for anything else. Transit, if you're into like public transit things. And then there's a bunch of, kind of open source options like organic maps, and things like that. But I find the biggest difficulty for me is that it's not so much kind of like the route tracking. You can figure that out on other apps, but especially when I'm not home in the place that I'm used to, it's the business listings that Google has that are so valuable. When is this store open? How long is it open? Is it reliable? That is the stuff that has been really difficult, I feel like, for the other ones to replicate, and is part of the reason why I still find myself turning back to Google. And the other one, as you mentioned earlier, is really like the productivity suite, right? The docs and the sheets in particular. I've tried Protons. It's just not there yet. The features are not there for its kind of docs. There are alternatives that I do want to experiment more with, Collabora Office, and, things like CryptPad, CryptPad being a more encrypted one, Collabora being one that's more like professional, targeted toward companies, enterprise, things like that. There are alternatives out there, but again, it's just like, as you were saying, Google kind of dominates, and the expectation is just, if you're collaborating on something, there's going to be a Google Doc. So I just get sent Google Docs all the time, right? And trying to get away from that is a bit difficult, and I feel like those are the ones that can be quite tough. And beyond that, of course, thinking like YouTube, if you're thinking about a video platform, like, there's no other ones that are really close to that, right?
It's too universal. Yeah. It's hosted on YouTube, and yeah, same with the doc. We plan the show notes for this podcast on Google Docs. It's just too ubiquitous right now. You can assume that everybody has access to it, has an account. You're going to avoid like these steps, or like, what is this? And maybe part of that mentality is that, where we assume that is an insurmountable hurdle is part of the issue too, and we're going to have to sort of contend with that and the friction, perhaps in this new age of friction maxing, as the kids say.
I'm down for it. I have an old iPod. I have like all the parts here, like ready to mod it, to
Yeah.
upgrade the storage and the battery and all that kind of stuff. Like, I'm experimenting with other things. I want to use tech differently. It's just tough, right? Because this is the easy way, and the way everyone does it.
We got a billion things to do. You were talking about the business listings. Are you saying we should bring back the phone book? Bring back
Bring back
Yellow
the
Pages?
encyclopedia, man. Like, let's let's ditch the search engine and just go back to our big set of books on our shelves. I'm for that. I still have a phone book here somewhere. I don't use it, but it exists.
Never change, Canada. Never change. I think we got like a notice when they sent our last phone book. It was years ago, but it was not like decades ago. It was like a few years ago. Like, this is going to be the last one, and it's like, that's kind of a moment. Kind of felt like a moment.
Absolutely. I got one last year, and it's like downstairs in a drawer somewhere.
Yeah. Have you ever used it?
No, never. But it's there
Waiting
if I do need to.
down.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, listen, Paris, it's been great to catch up with you here, and to hear your expertise on all things ditching Google and beyond. We'll have to follow up before long, and see how that journey continues, and if we ever fully cross that finish line of getting all the way off not just Google, but US tech. Until then, in the meantime, good luck with the book stuff. Paris's podcast is, of course, Tech Won't Save Us. The newsletter is Disconnect, and the forthcoming book is called Hyperscale, and it will be out this October, in just a matter of months now. Perhaps we'll have you back on then to talk about big, nasty data centers.
We've got to, right?
We got to do it. Okay, until then, Paris.
Always great to chat. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, that's it for today. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our guest, Paris Marx. Thanks also to our fair and mighty producer, Ryan Hodis. Say hi again, Ryan.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks also to Kate Osborne for steering the ship, Corinne Shadme for the delightful cover art, and again, to all of you for picking up those hammers and tuning in. Until next time, keep them high.